Hello everybody, it's the Royal Blue Podcast and we are live on YouTube. I'm Ian Croll with Gav Buckland and Dan Haygarth. It is 777 deadline day. It is Friday the 31st of May. It's 11 a.m. and we're here to talk all things Everton. First off, Gav, welcome back. How are things?
Fine, thank you. I've been away since last time I was in, which was the Friday before the Sheffield United game, which I think is that 3 weeks ago now, is it?
I think so. Yeah.
Just to say, by the way, I think I mentioned this before we came on air. I was approached by several people, more than several people, on the day of the Sheffield United game, who said how much they've enjoyed the Royal Blue podcast this season. So thanks to them and thanks to everybody who was listening. Especially one bloke who I can't remember his name, and I think his name was Brian. He was a youth team player at Everton with Alvin Martin in the early 70s, who was effusive in his praise. But this was about 1:45 on the Saturday night, and there was plenty of high fives and bear hugs and stuff. So he had a really good chat about the podcast. So
okay,
especially Brian, that was and lots of people said how much they've enjoyed the podcast this season.
No, yeah, it's always good to hear. You mentioned that before we came on air, and it's always good to hear the feedback.
Absolutely.
And obviously, yeah, we should. To be honest, we should do better in promoting ourselves really on the Royal Blue podcast. So, like you say, it's good to hear that, and good to get the feedback, and we'll always, it's always welcomed and it's always appreciated. You've been away as well, haven't you? Fuerteventura.
Yeah, Fuerteventura, yeah. It's Spanish for strong wind, isn't it? I think I'm not surprised.
And you just revealed to me before on the pod you've hurt your hand.
I've hurt my hands. Yeah, first day went for a run. First day was there within 5 minutes of starting.
Yeah.
Shoelace came undone. Time shoelace stopped off. Over. Load of gravel. And at my age, my hand's still sore. Been playing football this week in gloves.
You ain't intoxicated, were you?
No, it's only about 8:30 in the morning, which is probably, you'd expect to be intoxicated at 8:30 in the morning when you're on holiday, yeah. And I'm getting loads of stick this week playing football. I've had gloves on to protect my fingers, you know.
And Fuerteventura, nice?
Yeah, it loved it, yeah. A bit windy.
Yeah,
a couple of nice volcanoes.
Yeah.
But yeah, really enjoyed it. Of course, we went on I don't want to make this into the Gav to Ventura podcast. we went on a trip to see this volcano, and there was a young Italian couple there, and he goes, where are you from? He's like Liverpool, and he goes, I lived there for like 3 years. He lived like by ours, didn't he, for like 3 years.
Right.
So
okay.
It's funny, isn't it? Small world, isn't it?
Very. We've also got Dan Haygarth. Dan, welcome. I think that the last time you were on the pod, as a good omen, Everton beat Liverpool. Is that right?
Yeah, it was after the derby, pre-Brentford, was it? The game that we confirmed safety?
Yeah, okay,
I think, yes, it was in that big week.
In that realm.
Yeah, it was a great week, wasn't it?
Yeah, good omen then for you back on the pod.
Have you ever on more next season? Most weeks, I think, yeah.
That'll be nice.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Have you ever been to Fuerteventura?
No, I haven't. No. No. Need a holiday though. It's got the general election coming up, so after that,
take
hopefully,
a nice long break.
Take a month off, I think.
Yeah. Well, we are live, so if you've got any questions, any comments, please let us know. And if you want to send your feedback or hate mail to Gav or Dan, what is your Twitter handle, Gav?
At Gavin Buckland's one, I think, isn't it?
And Dan?
At Dan Haygarth 1.
Okay, I had written down there, but I just wanted to make sure it was right. And mine is at Ian Croll 1. So, please send your feedback. As always, it is greatly appreciated. Today's agenda then, plenty to discuss, plenty of news around Everton. Obviously, we'll talk about the takeover, some transfer news, Dominic Calvert-Lewin's contract, and if we've got time, we will talk about the League Cup seeding system, which obviously will impact Everton at some point. So yeah, but again, before we get going, just give us a like, give us a share, give us a subscribe, give us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, and leave us a comment in today's stream, and I'm sure we'll get back to you. Gav, we did a podcast on Tuesday, me and Chris and Connor, and this is on the back of some speculation regarding the takeover, with new interested parties. Specifically John Textor. But before we do that, today is basically the deadline for 777 to finalise their take it over of the club. But it's not going to happen, is it?
No, it's been clear it's not going to happen for a long while now, isn't it, really? Yeah. Some would say last September it wasn't going to happen. And to me, we've spoken about the importance of getting new owners in and stuff like that. The priority for me is ensuring the club's got enough funding to get over the next 2 or 3 months, isn't it, really? Either via a new owner, which is, may or may not happen, or via Moshiri and MSP or whatever. That's the priority for me. The ownership issue for me is not the biggest issue with Everton at the moment. It's how we're going to pay the bills over the next 3 months. The stories you hear is that the club are pretty comfortable with the position. Obviously, I think they might get a bit of Sky money, bit of money from transfers that are owing to us, bit of sponsorship money perhaps. You hear that the club's okay, but we have got some big commitments in that time, paying the bills, paying interest on loans, possibly paying money to clubs that we owe money to. We don't owe money for Onana, we owe money for Beto, don't we? Chimiti. And so there's big financial commitments there. And while getting a new owner is what people want and would be good, if it's the right owner, it's paying the bills. That's I've got to make sure that we would do. That was the disappointing thing with me. Moshiri met with was it the Fab he met with?
Yeah.
He said they couldn't say too well. He said a bit, and then they obviously couldn't reveal everything that he said. And he said, he said a few things. The one thing he didn't say, that he has said before to the shareholders, is, "I can assure you that the club will be funded over the next few months, and there will be no financial issues in that time." As the major shareholder and owner of the club, he didn't say that. He just said that I'm talking to a few other people who are interested parties. Well, that's not the same, the same thing, is it really? And I know he has told the shareholders before that he would fund the club, but and that was a while back. That's what I would have wanted to hear from Moshiri, really, even notwithstanding the fact that what Moshiri says and does can be two completely different things. So my priority is, as I say, is making sure that the club can pay the bills, keep the lights on for the next few months, while stuff off the pitch plays out.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Dan, regardless of what happens now with any new potential owners, have we dodged a bullet with 777?
Yeah, I think so. You look at their record with other clubs, those fan bases, they don't seem popular wherever they go. And then it's just been alarm bell after alarm bell in recent weeks and months, hasn't it? Their Australian airline, the fiasco with that, and whatever's been going on with Wanda, it just doesn't scream of a well-run company. And while, yes, most Everton fans would want to move on from Moshiri, that doesn't mean you take anyone. And this saga, which has become a circus with 777, we needed clarity on it. And it feels like this is the first time we're getting clarity on it, because we got to a certain date. It's not really because of anyone communicating properly. It's just we've got to a date that we knew that was the deadline day, and nothing's going to happen. So as Gav said, yeah, obviously the priority is getting through the summer, but Everton are sort of in this Groundhog Day at the minute, where we need to get out of this spiral. We need to find the next step. There needs to be a concrete next step. And I think my fear with 777 was they were never going to be a safe pair of hands. And I didn't really think it was ever going to happen. So, yeah, as to what's next, I mean, it's still up in the air, aren't we? And it is just exhausting.
Yeah, and obviously down to Moshiri at the end of the day, whatever goes on in his mind. I mean, Gav, I don't know if you've seen the podcast on Tuesday, but Conor O'Neill made an appearance, and he made a rather impassioned plea to, if you want to call it, to Farhad Moshiri to be more transparent, to be able to update the fans following on from this deadline. Is that something that he actually does need to do, Moshiri, then, in your opinion? You just touched on there that he hasn't actually said that he's going to fund the club continuously over the next couple of weeks and months. But at the end of the day now, this deadline is going to pass and he's going to be left with the decisions to make.
Yeah, I'm not saying that he funds the club. I'm just saying that he gives an assurance that the club has got enough funding, either it comes from, like Premier League money, season ticket sales, all that type of stuff. That the club has got enough money over the next few months to pay the bills. Whether he has to top that up is another issue, but that's what you want to hear, isn't it? That's what I want to hear, because there's been obviously a lot of talk this week, hasn't there, about going into administration, and that's been denied, and quite rightly so. But just to basically give people that assurance, really, that over the next few months we are okay, rather than and that stuff being said, probably privately by the club, that they're upset this week about talk of administration and all that, and quite rightly so. But yeah, I think Moshiri is constrained by what he can say, but I think he should have used the FAB meeting to say a little bit more, as I've just said.
Yeah.
Whether he says a bit more now once the 777
Yeah.
deals run out, it gives him a little bit more freedom to say.
Yeah, he's not under any legal obligations.
That would hopefully be the next step. But what would you want to hear Moshiri say then?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose just that he is going to be able to fund the club for the next, at least to the point where someone else comes in and takes over.
Yeah, that's his responsibility, isn't it?
That's
Until
what I mean.
someone buys it from him, it's his responsibility to keep the club afloat.
Yeah.
Regardless of how he achieves that, he needs to, unless he has a confirmed buyer that he's confident can take over.
Yeah.
It's up to him.
Yeah, it's not like he's hiding away from anyone, or it's like a power play. This is, once this deal doesn't go through, it's literally, well, Moshiri, what are your plans? What are you going to do? So, coming out and saying that would obviously, in our mind, peace of mind for the Blues, wouldn't it?
You would obviously, you'd like that a little bit more than sort of stuff that's been fed to the press over the last 48 hours. I think a little bit more leadership is required, but the one thing Moshiri hasn't done largely over the last 7 years is that leadership, is it really? And I'd be looking for a little bit more from him. But as I say, I can only go back to my original point: it's the funding of the club is the issue for me. And by the sounds of it, I think they may be, they may be confident that that's happening. That's okay for the next 3 months. And I think they said yesterday, what was it, the word, we've got a bit of financial stability was used yesterday. What that means is, well, I mean, there's long-term financial stability and short-term financial stability. I think they may be talking about the short-term financial stability there, possibly, but that's okay.
Yeah, I mean, do you expect any quick movement now following on from this? Or is this
regarding the sale?
Well, yeah, because obviously you'd expect weeks, maybe more months of negotiations now for Moshiri to get probably the best deal for him at the end of the day.
Well, yeah, and that's the problem, isn't it? And also, as well, the suitability of the owners. So there's several, and also what the people who owe money to the club, because they'll have a say in it. So there's lots of hurdles within this. Then we get into the realms of owners and directors tests and so on and so forth. So it's not a short-term thing that's going to be sorted by the middle of June, is it? And it would just be interesting to see how that plays out. And this goes back to what I said on the pod a few weeks ago. I think that's a really critical point in our history. Over how this plays out, has played out with 777, and will play out over the next few months. Because we still have money for anything between whoever you listen to, 50 to £100 million is still owing on for the stadiums we completed. And moving into it in 12 months' time, aren't we?
Which we all should look forward to.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's that element to it. So just have to wait. I don't know how it's going to play out. It depends who's knocking on the door and want to buy the club, because I tell you what, they're taking on a big burden if they are, aren't they?
Yeah, absolutely. Do you feel a little bit more at ease, though, Dan, with the situation now that 777 are going to be out the picture? Or do you think it's,
It's an interesting one, that, yeah. In that, from in my personal opinion, 777 would not have been a right fit, but nor do I think Farhad Moshiri's been a good fit for Everton. So we may have dodged a bullet, but we're left in the hands of someone who's not run the club that well, or well at all, in the past 7 years, and whether a question marks whether he can keep it, liquid over the summer. I think the priority for me is that we move into Bramley Moor with just, new ownership that suits the club and is more secure. This can't go on until, we've got this last year at Goodison that, as we say, is crucial. You have to move into Bramley Moor as a Premier League football club and in a far healthier position than we are now. That's not going to happen under Moshiri, clearly. So, while I feel secure in that I'm pleased we're not going to be bought by 777, I won't feel at ease until someone takes over Everton who makes it a more sensible, well-run organisation, really, I think. And I know that's a lot to ask for, but is it actually? It's probably a lot to ask for because we've been treated to such misery, but I think it's the least we can ask for, really.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I think there's a couple of points there, isn't it? The one about the 777 point making, though, is we say dodged the bullet, but it's cost us 200 million quid, hasn't it?
Well, that's true.
That's the that's
In
the further
loan,
debt burden on the club, isn't it? But the other point there as well made. We forget within all of this, we effectively haven't got a board, have we? Mm-hmm. We have had an interim board which has been in place for 12 months now, hasn't it? So that infects all the sorts of stuff we're going to be talking about, transfers and all that type of thing. That lack of decision making capacity also impacts on us and the day-to-day business, and just have to wait and see. I mean, there was an interesting point made last night. I thought that about Moshiri is, did he know all along 777 we're never going to get the gig, and so therefore they said, and they're never going to become owners, so but I'll allow them to fund the club, knowing full well that they won't become owners at the end of it. I sort of get that.
Yeah,
that actually.
I'm so glad you brought that up, because I brought this up on Tuesday, and I didn't want to be throwing any conspiracy theories around, or I don't quite believe it myself. But you've seen people online, social media, maybe suggesting that basically that's what Moshiri's done. Now that he's got this £200 million worth, well, £200 million to fund the club, part more of the stadium, that he's happy now to come back in and start funding the club himself. Is that? Do you believe that?
I don't know.
Is he smart enough?
Well, you don't know. It's just an incessant view of things, isn't it? Really, the downside for Moshiri, of course, is that makes the club more difficult to sell because it's got £200 million more worth of debt, albeit it's unsecured.
But now, if he doesn't, but then if he might not want to sell it now. Then so
we'll just have to see what plays out. He did say to the FAB though that he is talking to other people. So you still think that's his wish. What he gets for the club is a different thing, and there's so many different vested interests here, isn't there? Really, you've got Moshiri, you've got the people who owe money to the club, MSP, rights and media. You've got potential buyers. They all want the best deal for themselves, and how that sort of you can align all those interests to get a deal is going to be difficult, isn't it? Really, in the short term at least, unless somebody comes in and pays everybody off, which is unlikely. And so that goes back to my original point. That takes time. That will play out. What my priority is what happens over the next couple of months. It ties into our transfer activity that you're going to talk about, doesn't it, really?
Dan, did Moshiri see 9 months down the line that 777 wouldn't be able to fund the club, that the Premier League would come up with all these, impossible, if you want to call it criteria to meet the club, and that, court would be taken...
Yeah,
or people will be taking 777 to court.
I think looking at their track record, he would have been incredibly naive to think it would all get done quickly. I think as soon as it was announced last September, we all were suspicious. Well, maybe not suspicious, but nervous. Mm-hmm. I remember speaking to Andy Burnham about it at the Labour conference last year, and he spoke sort of on behalf of the fans as sort of, we're all nervous about this next step. And even then, I think, you looked at their record, their multi-club ownership, and the fan backlash, and you thought, yeah, this isn't wonderful. This isn't gonna be easy. So whether or not Moshiri used it, for his own benefit or not, I think everyone associated with Everton should have known it would drag out. Yeah.
Okay, well, we're getting some questions in, quite a lot actually, so I'll just try and address some of them now. So Rob Van Man, I think Van Man's a surname, I don't think it's Rob the Van Man.
Sounds like a Dutch centre forward. The early 70s, that, doesn't it?
Does. So great Rob says, hi guys, when is the deadline? The internet say midnight US time, so tomorrow. So, we know it's going to end up running over, but is the deadline not today? Is it officially worldwide tomorrow?
I don't think it's, if it's not being done since September, it's not going to be done in the next 24 hours.
True, yeah. I think today is the last day, I think. Yeah. As far as I know.
Okay. Yeah. I'm glad I got my facts right then. Kraft Matthew said, morning lads, hope all okay. The big worry has been the regular praise Moshiri has given 777, despite all the stories coming out. Can only hope new backers come forward ASAP. I mean, we're obviously going to come on to that. We'll talk about John Textor and the American business owner, but from what Chris and Joe have been saying over the past couple of weeks, there's more than one, if not multiple.
Yeah, and Moshiri said that himself, but goes back to what we said, isn't it? Are they suitable? Have they got the right amount of money to satisfy Moshiri? Can they satisfy the people who owe us money? And it's not as easy. It's not just there's other people who buy us. Yeah, we're all going to be okay. It doesn't work out like that, as we've seen ourselves, haven't we? Really.
Yeah.
I mean, the worrying thing within all this is when Moshiri went to market in September, he said 777 are the best
option.
Yes. Well, what the other ones like?
Best option for him, obviously. Clearly not the best option for the
club.
club.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's
those things don't necessarily align, do
absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay, well, there is other questions coming in, but there's a lot of questions coming in about Dominic Calvert-Lewin, so we'll address them when we talk about it. Gav, so, what's his name? John Textor, American businessman, Crystal Palace part owner, has publicly made his intentions clear about wanting to invest in the club, buying the club. I can see from your face there you're clearly unsure already about him, or you're not so...
As he said that, he said that it would be difficult, wouldn't it? Because he's been trying to sell a shareholding in Palace. I mean, if you go with what he said at the weekend, I mean, he values his shareholding probably at Palace far higher than the true market value. He says he reckons Palace is worth £1 billion, doesn't he? So if you've got 45% of the shareholding, that's £450 million.
Well, he's the highest. Yeah. He's the majority shareholder.
No, he isn't. He's 45%. So he's got the biggest level of shares, but he's not got.
No. He hasn't. I was going to say he doesn't have control of the club.
No, and that's his issue, isn't it? Yeah. His issue is, I can't get control of the club. I can't get the extra 5%, and therefore I'm possibly looking to go elsewhere. That's all well and good saying that, but that means that actually trying to sell those 45% shares become difficult, because who's going to pay that amount of money that he wants not to be the controlling interest of the club? Because Steve Parish is, isn't he? And I think he's the smallest shareholder. So there's a problem there selling his shares to then look to buy Everton. And I think he said within the timescales that are available, it's not going to be possible for him to do that.
So why has he come out then? Is it a power play, do you think?
Possibly. Just to put it out there. Yeah. But not wrong with a little bit of publicity. So there's lots of, again, it goes back to saying buying Everton. There's a lot of hurdles to overcome there, and you get the impression that he's not. It's a frustrating thing for him not to get the 50%, but how he's going to sell those 45% shares for the price he wants, and he's a businessman, he's not going to sell them cheap, is he? True. Is going to be a different matter. So yeah, it was good that everyone saying, "Oh yeah, he takes over and he's a rich man and he appears to have a lot of financial wherewithal, and he's done well with the other clubs that he's got an interest in. They've done well, haven't they? But when you read the small print of what these people say, it's not going to happen, is it, really, in the short term? And we'll just have to see how that plays out.
If it's not going to happen, then Dan, is it not a strange move? Because he's come out with quite high praise for Everton, and as Everton fans, Blues, you think, oh, that's good. But as a Crystal Palace fan, you'd be a bit like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Why are you coming out saying something like that about another club?
It's an interesting one, isn't it? Yeah, I hadn't thought about it from the Palace perspective, but sorry to interrupt, but there's even some Everton fans who have been back and forth, either side, positive and negative, pros and cons, basically been saying, well, I don't want him because that's quite disrespectful to what he's doing already. You don't want someone like that at your club. Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? And are we in a position to say who we do and don't want? I think there's so many Everton fans that would be sort of anyone but Moshiri. There might be a lot who are anyone but Moshiri and 777. So with each step, you're sort of narrowing your possibilities. I think, it has been interesting that he is involved in another Premier League club, and he's quite openly spoken about Everton. That's not, I'd be annoyed if I was a Palace fan, I think, but it's business, isn't it? Yeah. It's quite a ruthless game, and I think he sees an opportunity here with Everton, and from what I can tell, wants to take it. And I think that's just what happened.
He clearly wants control or more control, and he doesn't really care
football club,
what club it is by the looks of it.
Yeah, I get what you're saying about being disrespectful to Palace, but he's not the decision maker there, isn't he? He's just a shareholder. I mean, if it was Steve Parish saying that, as a Palace supporter, I'd probably take a bit of umbrage. But he's sort of like a silent partner, isn't he? Really, so it's a slightly different thing. It was insistent what he said, and he was bigging the club up, wasn't he? And so on, which always goes well with Everton supporters. But when you look at the finer detail of what he's saying, and it's not, certainly not clear cut, is it?
No.
And also then he's got to find a suitable financial package like anybody else to buy the club. So watch this space, but I don't think anything is happening anytime soon on that, for purely the reason I can't sell the shares, can he?
Okay, well, just sticking with Textor then, and I'm going to have to read my notes from this because I wrote a little bit, but have you both seen the video of him and his rant after the Botafogo?
Yeah.
So have you seen it?
I'm aware, yeah.
So Chris Beasley did the piece on it yesterday, and it's obviously, I think, basically I'll read my notes out. So a video, if you're not, context, if you're not aware of this, for those listening and watching, a video of Textor has recently resurfaced online, and he's been embroiled in somewhat of an X-rated rant. Textor is basically the owner of the Brazilian club Botafogo, who in November 2023 were 3-0 up to Palmeiras and ended up losing 4-3. This was on the back of a red card for a Botafogo defender, and then obviously the end went down to 10 men and ended up collapsing, losing the game 4-3. Anyway, after the game, there was a pitch-side interview for one of the TV channels over in Brazil, and Textor complained that it was not a red card, and that the game was riddled with, this is a quote, corruption and theft. Chris Beasley yesterday, by the way, writing this piece, had to speak to our legal guy about all this, so he just wanted to make sure that everything went out. But in short, Textor was unable to sufficiently back up his allegations when he was reprimanded and fined for his outburst. So, it's not a good look, Gav, really, is it, for someone like that? It's, not ideal.
Yeah, it's all incessant, isn't it? And it's entertaining, but as goes back to what I said before, I'm not sure this is happening anytime soon, is it really? Whether you want, just generally speaking, as a supporter, would you want somebody in your boardroom doing that after the game? You probably wouldn't, but there'd be a part of you probably would, wouldn't it? Really. Yeah.
But then, would you not compare that to the Forest?
I was thinking about that. Yeah.
Social media admin saying about the referee.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. But the thing is, he made a lot of money, hasn't he, over the years, and he's lost a lot of money, I believe, from through his investments. So, do you want somebody who's a bit of a risk taker at a football club? It's an incessant one, isn't it? Really. But ultimately, that's what you get, isn't it, really? It's not as if you've got a minority shareholder from a London club before his owner.
What's the lesson to be learned from this, Dan?
In an ideal world, I think you'd want your owner to be quite calm, level-headed, sort of never the headline. Yeah, I think well-run football clubs, their managers speak for the club. The players and the managers represent the club. The owners are just quietly funding it behind.
But I think that's a really interesting point. I've been thinking about this a lot, isn't it? But for as long as I've been watching football, is the manager has been the club, hasn't it? Really, and the owner's been in the background, hasn't it? Really, where for the first, certainly until John Moores came to Everton in the early 60s, it was the power in the club was the owner. The manager was like the coach. He never heard of the manager. They stayed in jobs for years. Was very much a lower profile than what they became from the 60s onwards. And football's getting back to that now, isn't it, really? Where you see some of the jobs that the big clubs do. I'm talking about Big Six here again, sorry. Yeah. The coaches who are being offered those jobs, they're not big personalities, are they? They're not, big charismatic figureheads, not a Klopp or a Mourinho or whatever. They're just now coaches, aren't they? The importance of them in the club is become less and less important because the power and the glory is going back towards the owners becoming the figureheads of the club, aren't they? It's you couldn't imagine Chelsea 15 years ago appointing a championship winning manager as a coach, could you? Seeing that that McKenna's been linked with Man United and people like and coaches at a similar level, and that's because I think owners now see managers as a threat to them, and want to sort of diminish their importance within the club, and that's by not calling them manager anymore, calling them head coach.
Liverpool made that change, didn't they? Yeah.
And it's going back. It's going back to really what it was football for the first 80 years of its existence, where the manager was not necessarily anywhere near the most important person of the club. I mean, most clubs didn't have a manager. And so this type of behaviour, I think, is what we're talking about. Well, you possibly will see more in the future. So post-game, it won't be the manager going off on the rant, it'll be the owner. And because they're in it for not just financial reasons as an investment. And it'd be interesting to see how football plays out in that regard over the next 10, 20 years. And you're increasingly seeing it now, aren't you, within the game. So, as I said, with Forest last year and one or two other clubs. And, and that may impact on sort of people that want to buy clubs like Everton, who they are, and what they're in it for.
I mean, just on that point, we've been the victim of that ourselves with Moshiri, haven't we?
Absolutely.
You know, Moshiri phoning up TalkSport, Jim White, saying we put in a bid for Sahar, and Marcel Brands, who was the director of football at the time, had no clue what he was talking about. Absolutely.
And you're seeing that, and the really smart ones, as you say, like say FSG, they stay in the background to make the right appointments and they can work for you. And
I didn't want to bring them up, but now that I think they have been probably the ideal way to run a football club.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's who you would want. But the other aspect to this about the ownership is that it's American, isn't it? And a lot of, as we well know, a lot of American investors see the Premier League as something that actually it's good to invest in because they see clubs that are undervalued. I'm not so sure about that for the clubs outside the top six, but that's a different story. They say overall that it's the Premier League undervalues its clubs compared to those in the NFL, and that may be of assistance to us. But the problem with us is we've got £500 million worth of debts and the stadium to finish, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Do you think just last point on that then? Do you think the owners are coming into more prominence because in their minds they've got the money, they've made the money, they own the club, they should be able to make the decisions?
Yeah, and I think there's partly that, and I feel like sort of football fandom's changing a little in that people are so much more obsessed with transfers and money and
behind the scenes type stuff.
Yeah, I think Twitter especially, and I know Twitter's not representative, but it feels like that matters to people more than results, waiting for transfer rumours and things. It's like, I don't like it really. But yeah, I mean the owner, the game has changed, hasn't it? Changed with the Premier League, but it's just changed again in the last, whatever it is, 5 years, probably since the Neymar transfer. I think like that was a watershed moment where it just became about ownership and money. Yeah, could just entirely that bled into what fans cared about.
And that's relevant to Everton, of course, because that is the type of stuff that will happen to Everton after Moshiri. You would think, wouldn't it? Possibly. And I think football, the way it's changed, the way it's presents itself, will change enormously over the next 10 years. I think you're spot on there. But actually, the actual football itself becomes slightly
side show, isn't it? Yeah.
It's about content, isn't it? Clubs produce their own content now, the content providers, and that will only increase the Disneyfication of football, I think it's called, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, in a way, just on that, like I've always found that now, because how much it's changed, the football itself is actually a sideshow, a subplot. When you're watching the game, you're not spending money, are you, on the club? So it's kind of like, well, it's an annoyance actually playing football sometimes for those in charge of the club.
Yeah, absolutely. Good content for us, though, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah, let's face it. Don't bite the hand that feeds you ultimately.
I mean, to be honest, my lesson learned from John Textor's outburst is never speak about football when emotional.
Yes.
That was my only lesson to be learned from this. Yeah. We'll move on then from the takeover talk, because there's not really much else to say unless we get some breaking news this afternoon. We kind of know what's going to happen, and there's not any other interested parties who have made themselves known. So we'll move on to Calvert-Lewin, Dan. We were talking about them beforehand. Everton have offered them a new contract. Are you surprised initially that Everton have offered them a new contract, or did you think that the club have got to be seen to be proactive in, keeping our better players, so to speak?
It's an interesting one, isn't it? Because I think I am a little bit surprised, because this Newcastle interest seemed quite believable to me, in that I think you can't really get away from the fact that we are going to have to cash in on certain players this summer, and I thought Calvert-Lewin would be one of them. So I wondered if the club thought there was actually any point in offering him a deal. I know it's not an ideal situation, is it, to be selling someone when they're heading into the last year of their contract, but sort of if he's going to go, he's going to go this summer, and therefore why offer him a new deal. But I'm pleased that we have. In an ideal world, I'm a big fan of Calvert-Lewin's. In an ideal world, I think he would stay for me. And even in this pragmatic world with not much finances around, I would still also like to keep him. But yeah, I'd be surprised if he signed it, I think.
Gavin, I'd be surprised if he signed it as well, just because I actually think he's gearing himself up for a free transfer next year. I've always thought that. Is this the first time as well? I don't know this for a fact, that the club have offered him a deal. Is this the first time that he's been offered this deal? Do we know that? Because
the one was offered 12 months ago, do you mean?
Well, so was the one? Yeah.
I don't know.
I'm just disappointed that we've let it go down to the final 12 months, to be honest.
It goes back to what I was saying before. 12 months ago, we didn't have a board, did we? Yeah. And there was all that type of stuff, isn't it? And, yeah, and I mean, it says the clubs the club and the players in talks. That's not something the contract's been offered, does it? It's just in talks. You know, those talks.
Ongoing talks, I think.
Yeah,
the freeze.
Whether there's a contract being offered, I don't know. But Dan, something's got to give here, hasn't it? You know, and yourself. It's a bit of an interesting one, this, isn't it? Really, it's different. I mean, Calvert-Lewin signed his last contract, I think, in 21, isn't it? When he was in the different places played, had 2 decent seasons, hasn't he?
Yeah, he had.
Scored 20 goals in the COVID season. Albeit, I think, you know, a bit difficult how to judge that one. So, in those 3 years, and it's interesting in that. I'm not sure how much Calvert-Lewin, his agent, brings to the table in these negotiations and his representatives, because the club will turn around, he'll turn up and say, right, okay. The club will go, what you've done over the last 3 years since you signed your contract is the last one. And, well, I've only played 74 games in 3 years. Half the games available to the club. We've only scored 15 goals in 3 years. So that's a very low point to start a negotiation, isn't it? Because this is his big contract, isn't it? Your mid-20s contract is your peak years, and that's when nominally you're going to be earning the most money in your career in that deal. So this is a big contract, but he's not bringing a lot of evidence to say, right, this is what I deserve, top dollar here.
Okay.
And the club will say there's 2 reasons for that. Is, you know, A, you've been injured 50% of the time, and B, when you haven't played, you've only scored once in every 5 games, including penalties. And so that's a low starting point for Calvert-Lewin. Saying that, the club will turn around and say, well, actually, if we do sell him, we're then going to buy somebody. And will we be able to buy a similar player for what we sell him for? And there'll be wages and so on, and agents' fees. And actually, the one thing we want to avoid at the moment is, going back to our original discussion at the start, is getting a load of cash out the club. I know we get some money off Newcastle, but it may cost you more than 20 million to replace somebody with Calvert-Lewin's ilk for all his limitations. So it's a difficult one, isn't it? And the club haven't spent so long with Dyche rehabilitating them, to rehabilitate them and then say, "Oh, see you, mate," is another, is a bit of a contradiction, isn't it? So the movable parts in this deal, I think, are various. As you say, hey, you might say, "No, so I'm going to sit on sit on this, leave next year, and so this is my big contract, and this is what I'd do if I was a player. Always go into your big contract on a free, because that's when you can really maximise your wages."
Mm-hmm. That's true.
You know, that I'd always, if I was a player, I'd always sign a big, if it was really good, I'd sign a really big deal at 23, 24, finish about 27, 28, and then go on a free then. Yeah. Because that means for, someone like Tarkovsky, that means that in my late 20s, early 30s, I can really maximise my income. Obviously, I've got to be good and stuff. and he may do that. He may just see out his contract, which he's perfectly entitled to do. At the same time, the club might turn around and might want him to sell him then, because they might want need the cash. So with the move, I think what I'm saying in here, after about 5 minutes of going on about it, is there's lots of movable parts in this deal. I don't think, in terms of getting maximum wage off Everton, Calvert-Lewin's in a particularly great place.
I think, though, he knows that the club value him.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because, irrespective of his quite lean goal-scoring record since Ancelotti, I think he knows, and I think we all know Everton are a different proposition when he plays, and I think that's in his corner.
Yeah.
In that whether or not he's scoring goals, Everton play better when he plays. I think.
Yeah, I would think so. The style of it suits the style. The style of play suits him, doesn't he? And he suits the team.
And yes, though, a lot of his goals last season were penalties. After that Newcastle penalty broke his goal drought, I thought he did play really well in the run-in. And I think he could hold that over the club. But yeah, it's interesting as to, one, how much we'd be willing to pay him in wages, and two, do they just not want to sell him for, I don't know how much Newcastle will be willing to pay, but sell him for whatever this summer. I just don't know.
Yeah, I mean, we'll come on. We'll continue with this, but just on his Barron spell, I'm actually a big Calvert-Lewin fan, and I know his numbers haven't been fantastic, and it is down to injury. I know he's had one or two good seasons under Ancelotti, and I know again his numbers haven't been great, but the Barron spell did coincide with a lot of the players around him having Barron spells themselves. Do you not think, if you look at the likes of McNeil, Harrison, Decore was gone. It all did kind of coincide at the same time, and you can't really dispute that because we went for 13 games, was it, without a win?
Absolutely. But he is a streaky player, isn't he?
Yeah.
You know that.
You said that, and
you
were spot on with that.
He's a streaky player. So he had a similar balance spell. I think it was the 2020 and the 21, something similar. So that's not necessarily down to that for him, because I think he's got a bit of previous in that. I was just thinking, if I was another club, my club with insistent Calvert-Lewin, say, there's been a lot of figures bandied about for him, hasn't it? We're selling for 15 to 20 million quid, say. Hang on a minute. If I was a fan of the club who was interested in him, say, what, we're bidding 20 million quid for the striker who scored 15 goals in 3 years and went 22 games without scoring last season, you'd be going, oh, I don't know about that, and I'm going to be putting on big money. I'd be saying, I'm not so sure about that. I don't know. In all of this, it's what I'm saying is it's not necessarily a given, I think, that the club will offer him a big deal. That actually the club will be in it's not like 2021 where they had interest from Arsenal, I think, and it was 50 million quid bids were put in. They're spoken, hasn't he, this week and then previously about being ruthless and hanging on for the best fees for players that we want to transfer. That also applies to the wages that they're going to pay players, doesn't it? Keeping on the sound business footing. And there's absolutely nothing Calvert-Lewin's recent record, both on and off the pitch over the last 3 years, to justify a big wage, is there really? Would you say?
No, I mean, I had a really good discussion yesterday with some fellow Blues on Twitter, and it didn't really occur to me some of the points that they were making, and we were discussing it just before we came on, Dan. So if you want to get your thoughts across here, but a lot of them were saying Dominic Calvert-Lewin owed Everton. Basically, he needs to stay loyal. Now, whether that's seeing out his contract for one more year or he should sign a contract because of everything that's happened, he has had a Barron spell and he has been injured, and you could question, has he repaid the club back over the years? What's certain for me is that Sean Dyche deserves a lot, if not all, the credit for this past 12 months in keeping Calvert-Lewin fit. Now, I know Calvert-Lewin's probably done all the work himself, keeping himself fit and stuff like that, but my question is, I suppose, Dan, does he need to stay loyal to Everton, and does he owe Everton?
I think he owes Everton a bit, yeah. I mean, Everton have backed him very early. Gave him the number 9 shirt very early. I seem to remember that Marco Silva season. It was 18, 19. He got number 9, which I know it's only a shirt number, but it does mean something.
Yeah.
He's been the main man. Even when you always got the sense that when Richarlison was around, there was that slight rivalry with Calvert-Lewin for who was the main man. And I felt like Everton have very much built around Calvert-Lewin since he was a teenager. So I think he does owe the club a lot. We've turned him from a lower leagues player into a Premier League player who is attracting interest from, well, at one point from Arsenal and now from Newcastle. So Everton do owe him a bit, but I wouldn't be inclined to say he needs to sort of sacrifice career decisions for that. If he were to turn around and say, I want to play for Newcastle United, I would find it tough to say that's a disgrace. How dare he? Because he's ambitious. If a club that is going places wants him, I think he'll leave, and I think he'd leave with good wishes from most.
Yeah.
I think.
I mean, this is my personal opinion, Gav, and I know a lot of people will probably disagree. I personally would not sell him this season, depending on valuation. Obviously, if you're talking like ridiculous money, like 40, 50 million, but I don't think we'll get that. I think maybe because of his contracts running out, you're looking at something between as low as maybe 15 to 25. Yeah. But as you mentioned there, who do we replace him with?
Yeah.
If he does go. For me, I would keep him and let his contract run down, because I think if he stays fit, he will play an integral role in keeping the club in the Premier League for the first season in Bramley-Moore.
Yeah. If he stays fit is the
if he stays fit
is a statement there,
but,
isn't it? You know,
sorry to interrupt again, but just on Dan talked about Newcastle. I don't think Newcastle know how to use him, and I think I wouldn't be surprised if he goes there and picks up a lot of injuries, niggly injuries, or he gets a long-term injury.
Depends what happens with Isaac, doesn't it, at Newcastle as well?
But I just think there'll be so much pressure on him at Newcastle to score goals that he will play when he's probably only 70, 80% fit. Whereas Dyche, we know in this season, has not done that. He's only played him when he's been 100% fit.
Yeah, well, that was Lampard's mistake, wasn't it? The suspicion was he was playing. Yeah. Well, Dyche has been desperate this year, hasn't he?
But we've had Beto as well to come in on that.
Yeah.
Sorry, keep interrupting you. Go on.
No, I get that. I forgot what was we. I think what I always say is the best time to sell a player is 12 months before it's too late, and I think that applies here. We've got to sell him, or he signs a new deal. But if he signs a new deal, I don't think the club should be pushing the boat out to give him a big wage. I think it should reflect his previous performance over the 3 years, his injury record, and as he reaches his late 20s, you do start to get a lot more niggles and stuff anyway. I would find that's probably what I would want, really, if he's kept a new contract but on a wage that's commensurate with what he's done and what we potentially will do in the future. The problem is that his representatives might not think that's a fair deal. It goes back to the ownership of Everton, doesn't it? It's a similar thing played out at player level, isn't it? He's
not going to get the same wages at Everton that he probably will get at Newcastle, isn't he?
Absolutely, and you get a cut of the deal, don't you, as well? So I don't know. It's a bit you could do 3 podcasts on this, and not get to the a correct conclusion, couldn't you? I think it'll be interesting to see how this plays out. Really. I think probably, as I say, I think Everton shouldn't go out their way to go overboard on a big deal for him. That's the one thing that should be avoided.
Okay, well, we've got some interesting points on this. So Ian Clark says, we can't afford to buy a similar replacement for Dom. I think it would be great next season with a decent supply line, which is kind of, that was my suggestion, wasn't it? Some people disagreeing with me. D Brass Monkey says, the whole Dominic Calvert-Lewin situation has got an air of Tom Davis about it. A player we should have sold and made a profit, but got emotionally attached to. Dominic Calvert-Lewin can hold the ball up, but has had one good season. Sell. Probably touching upon what you were saying.
I think that's spot on. Yeah. I think he's okay, Calvert-Lewin, but I just think he's okay. I think he's
not a Harry Kane type player, is he?
Lou is. How many people are? Not many. And the thing is, in 21 when he signed his deal, he was probably, after Harry Kane, second choice for England. He's now gone down the pecking order. He's probably his 5th or 6th choice for England, isn't he? As a striker, there's probably 3 players who moved ahead of him in that time. Which, and again, the club know that, don't they, in terms of the deal.
Dan, Benny B said Dominic Calvert-Lewin would actually suit Newcastle, so disagreeing with what I was saying. But there's a lot of people in the comments now saying, would you take Callum Wilson if Dominic Calvert-Lewin was to go the other way?
Probably not now.
Injury prone as well, isn't he? I know he always scores against us though, doesn't he?
He does. I might have done a couple of years ago, maybe.
Yeah.
But not now.
Past his best.
Yeah.
He's 32, Callum Wilson.
Yeah, he's not a shrewd.
I'd take Isaac, I think, probably.
Yeah. Well, there's people there saying Dominic Calvert-Lewin, obviously depending on what Isaac would do, whether he stays in Newcastle, he's going to be second fiddle to him.
Absolutely. And what you want to be, second fiddle or the main man. I get what people say, and one of the things is people say you should keep him because he suits our style of play. So we put him on a 4-year deal, and then Dyche goes after 12 months, and we get another manager who wants a completely different style of play. That may not suit him, and that's
we can only plan short term,
you know what I mean. that's where I don't think he should say we want that should never be a reason for keeping somebody. It suits our style of play. Well, actually, that style of play is only because of the current manager. Another manager might want to bring a different style, and this is the style of play that does suit Calvert-Lewin. I'm not sure whether he would. And that's why I never understood Arsenal's interest. A passing team where they would keep a lot of possession. You've got to be technically very good, and keep the ball moving and be able to interchange with teammates. I don't think that's his game. And I was surprised with Arsenal's interest accordingly in 2021. But we'll have to wait and see. But I wouldn't keep somebody because he suits our style of play.
Interesting point is, I don't think the ins and outs and full details of the contract have been released, but would there be a suitable compromise, if it was just a 1 year extension on top of what he's already got? I would probably say that would work for Everton.
Work if you wanted to sell him, because you'd get more money for him.
But then it would go in Gav's point where he would probably after those 2 years still be able to get a big contract himself, maybe.
If he scores goals, that would be interesting. Yeah, if it was just an
extension. Might be that though, mightn't it? We don't know.
Depends what his offers are elsewhere. Yeah. You mean by sign a 1 year extension at Everton when I can get a 3 year deal for the same money at another club? It's an insistent one. I do get what you're saying now. I know it's a wider point what you're saying about keeping for this season, because I think the one thing we need for this season is do not take any risks. We want to be consistent.
That's
we
my
want to be consistent with the last season. In other words, make sure we've got the same players, playing the same system. Do the best we can to keep all those players. There'll be one or two that we might have to go or will be going. But keep that consistency. Yeah. Don't take any risks with the squad, because we wanted to keep us in the top flight going into Bramley-Moore. And that sort of feeds him at your point. Yeah. Why unnecessarily destabilise things by getting rid of somebody who's integral to the part of the team?
The goals he scores next season to keep Everton in the Premier League, to go to Bramley-Moore as a Premier League football club, are probably worth a lot more than any transfer fee you'd get this summer. So, why sell?
I was going to mention this as part of a wider discussion on transfers. That should be our strategy as the club this season, shouldn't it, really? During the summer is, if we talk about big sums to the club, I don't see that, is just make sure we've got the same players as last season. That's why we've offered deals to Coleman. That's why we've offered deals to Young. That's why we're in discussions with Calvert-Lewin. That's why, but obviously Jack Harrison's another one will come into that. Is for our transfer strategy for me should be keep the same players as last season. Just do the same as what we did last season, and we'll be okay.
Should be enough.
And that's do not take any unnecessary risks. And one of them risks could be this Calvert-Lewin situation where we sell them, and then have to get somebody else who maybe not as good, or
Well, my worry would be that we just wouldn't replace them at all, and then we would be left with a Beto and Schmitty,
which is not ideal, is it?
Just if I can make
a lengthy point, this
I know it is. It should have just been called the Calvert-Lewin podcast. Yeah. If I can make one more point for Calvert-Lewin, okay, his goal return hasn't been great, but he has come up with some big goals.
Huge,
hasn't he? And we might need some big goals next season.
Yeah, but scored in a derby.
Palace. I mean, the Newcastle goal, it was a big goal, the penalty.
Well, penalty, Burnley goal, I suppose, wasn't it? Really, that'd be an important one. Yeah, I get that, but you don't buy a striker because he scored. You don't give a 4 year deal on 120 grand a week to a striker because he scored in a derby for you, does he really? No, we sort of did that with Ferguson to a degree, didn't we? in '94. You've got to take the emotion out of this. And the thing with Calvert-Lewin is, and understandably with fans, is people are emotional about it. Keep him, he's a Everton number 9 and all that, and I totally get all that. But ultimately, if you take, a lot of players with their agents going to the negotiation with clubs with the big stack of stats, is Calvert-Lewin stats are not that great, are they, over the last 3 years? And the club know that, and his representative know that, and that will inform some of the discussions, I would imagine.
To be a fly on the wall of those negotiations in the
it'll be interesting that this will show you, I think, how is Thelwell true to his word.
Do you think they'd start those negotiations like that, Gav? You've been a bit crap, Calvert-Lewin, but we still want to sign you.
Well, you are negotiating with your employer, aren't you? And your employer has a responsibility to get best value, and Thelwell's spoken about that with wider transfer dealings, isn't he? And they're not going to turn around and say, "Oh, yeah, scored in a derby, mate. Here's 120 grand a week." They'll have a look at his injury record, and his age, and that he's, as a player, he's probably not going to get much better, because he's not an early 20s player anymore, and that will be reflected in the salary we pay her. I mean, a smart will be a low salary, but if you reach a certain amount of appearances
and goals,
a season and goals, then we'll pay a bit more. That might be an option, but he might depends on the offers elsewhere for him.
Yeah.
If they come in.
Well, we're not going to be able to get all our points in the podcast because we're coming up to an hour. But I do want to talk about just overall transfers, probably players who are going to leave, Dan.
Yeah.
That's another hour, isn't it?
I know. We'll be quick because I know you guys are busy, and it's my last day for the week, so I want to get off.
That's fair.
If reports to be believed, Dan, we need to sell at least one big name player by the end of June.
Yeah.
But Thelwell's literally come out this week or the past 10 days and been quite robust and said we're not going to be bullied. But I fail to see where Everton find themselves in a strong position with this scenario.
This is the problem, isn't it? Every club in the world knows how bad our finances are. But I think we could be quite easily bullied into selling people for less than you'd otherwise get.
And if there's a deadline on it as well.
Exactly. So, yeah, I'm preparing myself for the sale of Branthwaite, I think. Won't be nice, but yeah, I think that just feels he's destined for a huge club, especially if he plays in the Euros. But I don't see a world in which Everton don't sell Branthwaite and Onana. I just think that is going to happen this summer.
I mean, it's going to happen. Probably Onana, probably Branthwaite. Hopefully not. Hopefully we can get away with that. But I think for me, it's just the fees of them, isn't it? And we get enough for those players because for me, it's a Richarlison situation all over again where we ended up settling for 60, which I thought was quite good, to be honest, but the club believed his valuation to be in the region of 80 million. And obviously, again, that's another podcast in
sure
itself.
About that, yeah.
We wouldn't have broke PSR if we sold them for 80 million.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's not ideal, I think, is what we're saying. But Thelwell has obviously come out and tried to, basically just bring the ball back in our court a little bit and say we're not going to be bullied.
Yeah. But at the same time, you've got to sell players, and those two things, they're incompatible. Those two statements, aren't they? And we are selling from a not very strong position, aren't we? Really, because people know we've admitted essentially that we need to sell at least one player, but actually that goes back to the Calvert-Lewin thing. That's got to suit the other party, hasn't it? And also as well within this, you got to remember this, some of the potential buyers, they've got PSR issues themselves, haven't they? So it's not as if like there's a whole host of clubs with cash on the hip ready to buy, say, Branthwaite by the end of June for the fee we want, because A, they may not think he's worth that much, and B, they may not have the money in the first place, and why would you want to buy at the end of June anyway and then have 3 months of wages when he's sitting on his backside and playing in the Euros and stuff, possibly. And so it'd be interesting to see, but there will be goings. I would imagine the one there that I think it's really probably certainly will go is Onana.
Yeah. Who goes in for him then, Gav? Who do you think?
Onana?
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe somebody possibly abroad, but that's a bit of a strange deal, because we obviously still owe cash, don't we? To did we buy from? Was it Ren? Was it? Yeah, I can't remember.
For Onana.
Yeah.
Lille.
Yeah. Lille. Yeah. Lille.
We still owe them cash if the
who don't we owe cash to?
Yeah. Also, they've got a sell-on clause, haven't they? So you may think, oh, that's a good deal, but actually the actual cash that sits in your bank at the end of it could be slightly different.
Away,
but I think he's been making sounds, hasn't he?
We need him to have a good Euros, don't we?
Yes.
Yeah, and that'd be great. The only thing is we possibly need to make a sale by the end of June.
Just halfway through the Euros, isn't it?
Because the other thing as well, which has been lost in all of this, and I failed to mention at the start, the other priority is for us as a club, it's not only paying the bills over the next 3 months and sorting the stadium out, is the PSR. We've still got a PSR overhang from last season, which is really important for us, which is this interest thing, about 7 million. That's enormously important to us, because if that goes against us, that could make the difference between breaching PSR or not, but we might not know that until after the end of June, which I think it's a farcical sequence of events.
Yeah.
So we don't know what sort of financial position we're going to be at the end of June, possibly in relation to PSR, because the hearing over that may not have taken place. So that's the other aspect of this. But I would think one or two, at least one, but possibly two players will go over the summer, and that will be insistent to see how that affects us and what we can do with that money, if anything. Which goes back to the story at the start about have you got enough money to pay the bills and all that type of thing. Yeah, so wait and see on that one.
Okay, well, I did want to speak about two players linked with Everton this past week, but we're not going to have time. You can read stories about Jan-Niklas Beste and Kalvin Phillips on the Liverpool Echo website, and if you want to go further, you can listen to the podcast that we did on Tuesday where me, Chris and Connor talk about Kalvin Phillips. So there's content on the Liverpool Echo website regarding that, but I did want to just touch on, because I thought it was an interesting point. We talked about it before we came in, and we'll finish off on this, is this new League Cup seeding system. So according to the Telegraph, a seeding system is set to be introduced, which will stop clubs who are competing in Europe from being drawn against each other in a bid to prevent fixture congestion caused by the new Champions League format, which obviously comes into effect next term. Gav, we'll start with you on it, because you made a good point that it's only for one.
Third round, isn't it?
Only for the third round.
It's to do with the expansion of European football next year, as if we can't get enough European football, you know, from 6 weeks to 10 weeks. Isn't it, before Christmas, and two of those it's a bit boring this, but just had to bear with me. The Carabao Cup third round was over 2 weeks, and in both those weeks there's the first week I think there's Champions League games being played, and the second week there's Europa League games being played. And the problem for the Carabao Cup is, where all matches will be televised, is if a Champions League club gets drawn against the Europa League club, then they can't play each other in those 2 weeks, because one of them will be playing in Europe. And so the seeding is there for that reason, to avoid that eventuality.
You see it as a logistical step rather than a method of closing the shop for the top teams.
But even without seeding, the same clubs reach the Final Four anyway.
Yeah, it's true. That is true.
Anyway, it's just to avoid the eventuality where two clubs can be drawn against each other that can't play in the third round. Then there's an element of farce. However, there is another aspect to this which may play again this season. Is in the World Club Championship, when Liverpool played in 2021, they played at Villa, wasn't it? And they were forced to field a weakened team, didn't they? Because the squad was wherever it was, and I think it was the Middle East, was it? Tokyo, can't remember. And as a fan, we could legitimately say, well, hang on a minute, you're in the third round, the Clash of Europe. Well, so what? Feel that, you know, you've got you big teams with big resources. You can afford to put two teams out, can't you? Why should that affect the integrity of the competition? And the precedent being is when Liverpool played in 21. So I think that I understand why it's being done, but at the same time, you as a fan, you could say, well, I still not necessarily support it. But what it just shows up again, and this is going to happen, isn't it? The complete farce now that the fixture list has become squeezing too many games into too small a space. And this is going to happen far more in the future till something's got to give. There's been stuff about UEFA and FIFA this week, players, possible strike action, stuff like this over the amount of games they're being asked to play, and this is just another symptom of that, isn't it? And something that will happen more and more in the future, I think.
Are we in danger then, Dan, of potentially the League Cup being, abolished if this continues?
Yeah, I think we are. I think I've got a couple of quick points on this, which is one, they're making players play far too much, and it's affecting the quality of the sport as a result. And seems to be the root cause of so much of this is that there's more and more European football, which is then damaging the integrity of domestic cup competitions, which clubs like Everton dream of winning. Mm-hmm. But they're now being diminished, and they're put in a position where, certain clubs can't play one another because their priority is obviously European football, but it's the UEFA calendar bleeding into the English football calendar and consuming it, really, and taking away time that, why should the League Cup be diminished? There's however many clubs, 8 clubs, 7-8 clubs that play in Europe. The rest of the EFL play in the League Cup and dream of going to Wembley. why it's obviously it's the argument at the heart of the game at the minute, but why it's just so depressing, isn't it, when you don't follow one of those big six clubs, that your season is affected by their interests so much. So yeah, it frustrates me, and this is just another move towards marginalising the League Cup and marginalising domestic cup competitions, when actually they're the things that you dream of winning. You dream of a day at Wembley, but it's being sacrificed so that Tottenham can play Standard Liège. And you're like, well, why should I care?
Six times a season. Yeah. But the other aspect to this, again, conscious of time here, it's not just UEFA, isn't it? It's FIFA moving into the club competition.
With their club, their expanded club.
With the expanded bit, and that won't stop there, will it? And and that then has a trickle down effect, and ultimately you end up with this situation with the League Cup being marginalised, and unfortunately that's football for you, isn't it, really? And it's a wider discussion, but it does impact on us, as you say, around. Well, again, going on about it is, you mentioned there about Europe impacting on number of fixtures being played. Expanded European competition also means that in the Champions League, this new format means they get more money. And then that distorts domestic competition even more, doesn't it? So the Big Six have a certain gap to the rest of the clubs in the Premier League. From 24-25, that gap will get bigger because they will get more money from Europe that the other clubs don't get. So it distorts the competition even further, doesn't it, really, this new system of playing? I can't remember how many games it is to... What do you play, like 300 games to eliminate 8 teams or something like that? This is a ludicrous position, but that's modern football. At some point it's going to give in the next 10 years, as we said.
That's an interesting point, and I'm sure we could actually discuss it as a full podcast itself, but we have run out of time, I think. And to be fair, I do think that, it's obviously going to have to be when I'm back, and I don't think anything is going to have been decided by then, but we could do a whole podcast on Dominic Calvert-Lewin and his contract situation, because there's a lot of questions. I mean, I'll just finish off with some of them. Dominic Calvert-Lewin holds all the cards, and he knows that Everton need him. That's Kevin Murphy. Basically, Dominic Calvert-Lewin holds all the cards, Everton need him, and he knows it. He can wait a year and sign for mega money for someone else. I feel like that's been the main segment of the podcast, to be honest. The
and also stuff to discuss within that for future is there's somebody else with 12 months left on his contract at the club, and that's Mr. Dyche, isn't it?
You're desperate to do this. You're desperate for that, aren't you? And it's a valid point.
I think it's been lost in all these discussions is that and this goes back to the lack of decision-making capacity at board level. If you're Dyche at the moment, and then in the normal circumstances, you'd be saying, I've kept you up twice with all the stuff going on off the pitch. The first time I took you over, you're in the bottom three, whatever. Big improvements in the second season. I've got 1 year left on my contract. I think we need to discuss another one, don't we? That's what will happen in normal circumstances.
I'm going to make a note of this podcast, Gav, and we'll do it when I come back.
But it is. It's been lost, isn't it? And he's in a good position too. You talk about like Calvert-Lewin being in a good position. Dyche is even in a better position, isn't he? If you think about it.
Definitely. Well, anything else that you want to get off your chest, guys, before we finish off?
Got everything off my chest really today.
Yeah.
Well, there's plenty of comments that I haven't read out, so what I'll do is I will try and reply to them on my own YouTube channel, and you guys can do the same if you want, I suppose, because there's plenty of good points and good questions. But that's all for today's show. Please remember to hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and show us the support. And remember those 5-star reviews on Apple Pods and Spotify, and follow us on Facebook as well. It's Everton FC Liverpool Echo. I've been Ian Croll, joined by Gav Buckland and Dan Haygarth. Thank you guys for coming on. This has been the Royal Blue Podcast.